If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
Hey, welcome, fellow patriots and fellow believers. Welcome to another episode of Survival Dispatch News, where we stand firm in faith, family, and freedom. We're here for Americans who value self-reliance, traditional principles, and unapologetic truth and the gospel. You're the backbone of this nation, and we're honored to serve you with information you need to protect your loved ones and preserve our way of life. I'm your host, John Wheaton, joined by my co-host and partner in crime, S2. Welcome, brother.
Thank you, sir. How you doing?
Just fine. And today we are diving into history to uncover lessons that every God-fearing, liberty-loving American needs to hear. So today we are diving into the second excerpt from our series on communism. And today it's Red Baptism, Lenin, the Cheka, and the Cult of Violence. With no fluff. And this one's a rough one because this is the start of the real bloodshed. And it's something that you guys need to know. But we're going to expose Lenin, how Lenin turned to terror and twisted religion, and why that matters for conservatives who stand against tyranny. But before we get to that, we have some news that we want to share with you guys, because it is important to stay up to date on what is going on around the world, so, and in our country. So we're going to look at this. Antifa has returned, and this is a little clip from the Seattle area, and S2 has been kind of following this, so he can kind of speak to it. We'll watch this video real quick. It's about 48 seconds long. What a fitting beginning when we're talking about communism, because this is modern day communism crap going on. So S2, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I was looking at the back of their jackets there. I thought that was campus police when I originally saw that video this morning, but it looks like that actually is Seattle police. And frankly, I find this a pathetic display of cops backing down from low T soy boys armed with Rubbermaid garbage cans.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, those are those ones you buy at the home store that that don't really don't do anything but gather trash. It's kind of funny because if you look here, you can see the rounded edges, and they kind of, when you first look at it, you're like, oh, where'd they get those shields from? Oh, they're not. They're cut up garbage cans. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff.
Well, it's definitely a step down from what they were using in previous. It's definitely a step down from what they were using in previous years, which they were actually using cut up black 55-gallon drums.
Yep.
But one of the things that I predicted this morning is that if there wasn't a positive police answer to this, that this was going to be the start of the Summer of Love 2.0. Well, the police did respond to it. They called the SWAT team in, and there were people that were arrested this morning. So, which is good on amazing. Seattle police for responding appropriately to this.
Yep, and this is important. This is an important change from what we saw 5 years ago. So, good on the police for being rapid in their response. Absolutely. And so we'll continue to monitor this, because I think this is well, we all know that this is a planned tactic. So we'll continue to monitor this, and as news comes up, we'll install it in this very beginning of the episode. So the next story is that the Department of Justice has made some very, very key moves in the Second Amendment world, in that they have filed an amicus brief. And for those of you that don't know the legal jargon, an amicus brief is basically that you are agreeing with one side of a legal battle. So in the world of lawsuits that have to do with anything really, but especially with 2A, this is basically when you sign an amicus brief, you're saying we agree and we are trying to put further pressure for whatever court or whatever body that we want to take up this case to take it up. So the DOJ has filed an amicus brief in the Hawaii case of Wolford v. Lopez, which is a concealed carry case. Trump administration, the lead solicitor general, John Sawyer, is demanding clarity on our rights to bear arms, especially on private property open to the public. This is a win for gun owners who refuse to let bureaucrats strip away their God-given rights. But let's not get too comfortable, because SCOTUS has been spotty on Second Amendment cases, and lower courts love to twist rulings again. So this is a big, big move, because I don't think in the history of this country we've had the DOJ actually sign on in a pro-2A stance. Typically, especially with the last administration, they were suing left and right, trying to get our rights taken away. So in my opinion, S2, this is a very good sign for the position that the Trump administration is going to be taking. We just need to see more pressure.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I do like what I'm seeing as far as the direction the DOJ is going, and especially the actions that have been taken with the ATF as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Basically taking the Stasi and putting them on notice.
100%. And that's a really, really big deal. So moving to the next, which is an adjacent topic. This is Hannah Hill posted this, and this is concerning Snope v. Brown. Now, Snope v. Brown is a big case. That is the big assault weapons ban case out of Maryland that has basically been on the docket for the Supreme Court since January. And they keep kicking the can on this. They haven't removed it, which on Bruin, I think they relisted it 22 times before they took it up. So this is not dead, but this is the big one. There's two cases actually. And that is Ocean State Tactical versus Rhode Island, and Snope v. Brown, which is out of the state of Maryland, both very deep blue states. And it is Ocean State Tactical is a magazine ban, and Snope v. Brown is an assault weapons ban. And both of these have been left on the docket, which is not a bad sign, but the fact that they haven't been taken up is not a good sign. But Hannah Hill from South Carolina has filed a amicus brief. This is the Attorney General. This is a big thing. This is basically the same thing that the DOJ did, at a lesser, I guess, swinging a smaller bat, but they have joined in Maryland's assault weapons ban in the Pro 2A side to try and force this into the Supreme Court for ruling. Most of the scholars say that if it hits the Supreme Court, it's going to be ruled in our favor. I'm skeptical. I do not think that John Roberts will rule against the conservative side on something like this, because he would face such a backlash that even he can't do that. So Amy Coney Barrett, once again, don't know what to expect from her, but we'll see how this develops. In other news,
John has got other problems right now.
Yeah. Yep. So in other news, Canada's prime minister is at the White House today, probably talking trade and tariffs amid global unrest, while Trump pushes hard on border security, economic deals, This meeting could affect American jobs and our economy. As a conservative, we're skeptical of centralized power, especially when it comes from international agreements like any kind of treaty, because they try and treat those supersede our Constitution, and that is not something that we're happy with. And these agreements end up most of the time putting America last. But we'll be watching to see if this strengthens our position or just ties up more red tape. There's also another story out of the rejection of troops. And S2, I'm going to let you speak to that one real quick.
Yeah. Okay. So the president of Mexico rejected Trump's offer to send troops, and likely tied to border security or cartel crackdowns. And this comes as Trump refuses to lift emergency declaration at the southern border, and even talks about reopening up Alcatraz to lock up threats. He also mentioned something about Sing Sing as well. So that's kind of, I think he was trolling some people there with that. But for those of us who value sovereignty and secure borders, this rejection by Mexico is a red flag. It could mean more drugs crime spilling over while we're left to fend for ourselves. However, I see a couple of things happening here. Where Scheinbaum has come out and rejected the U.S. troops, guess what? They're already there.
Right.
They're already there. And the reason there's, and I can align this also with the whole thing that went on with the Houthis as well today. She had to reject this. Number one, she's scared of the cartels. The cartels run the Mexican government just as they do in Venezuela. So what's happening in Venezuela, they start with Venezuela with the TDA gang. Their training and their preparation for the journey begins there. They go to Colombia where fake IDs are provided. They go through Nicaragua where a logistical center for provisions is set up. And then they come to Mexico, and the Mexico cartels provide support for the routes across the U.S. border and into the United States. So these cartels, Cartel del Sol and the Sinaloa cartels and the New Jalisco cartels and all of those folks in Mexico, they're all working together, and she is scared to death of them. However, in her rejection, this allows her, just like it did with the Houthis, to save face. The Houthis came back and said, "Oh yeah, we're not going to stop fighting in defense of Gaza." But at the same time, they know that if they don't stop what they're doing, they're going to get the shit bombed out of them. And it's the same thing with Mexico. They were given an opportunity to save face, and that's what they did.
Yep. So very, very important. And we'll look at this last one here. This was the German leader, Friedrich Merz, stunned after losing secret leadership election. A post-World War II first in Germany. This is really interesting because this is Europe is trying to tamp down on what they call far-right candidates that are in a surge. Romania's election, several others in the European area, in the European Union. People are fed up with big government and open borders. They have seen a surge of Islamic terrorists and unknown people coming in to their countries, and they're voting for leaders who promise to put their own citizens first. So just like America first, it's whatever country they're in first, and that's what they want. They want sovereignty to return. For us conservatives, this is a reminder that the fight for national sovereignty and traditional values isn't just in an American battle, it's a global battle. This is a pushback against what we're talking about in our main subject. This is, globalization is a communistic ideal. It's removing borders, it's removing country sovereignty so that they can be ruled by something centralized, say like a WEF or a UN or a EU or a NATO or whatever term you want to use. It is a centralization of power to strip away the sovereignty of each nation involved. And so this is another big deal. I don't know if you're aware of any of this stuff that's going on in Germany with MERS or not.
I'm not aware of what's going on with MERS, but I am aware that the German secret intelligence agency, I call them the secret police, aka the Stasi, I actually yeah, that's West German. They have actually just taken the AFD party and designated them as an extremist group. So the people in the AFD party, which is the alternative for Deutschland,
Hmm.
basically are their equivalent to Donald Trump. Um,
Hmm.
they're a little worried right now that they could end up getting thrown into jail, getting arrested and thrown into jail over them running, because they are running as a populist group, and they are very, very popular in Germany right now, because like you say, people are tired of the bullshit. And
Yep.
it's more about all of these people, all of these unions. You know, they wanted the American Union, they wanted the European Union, they wanted the other union, the Middle East Union. What that was is a UN plan to turn those areas with those unions, basically eliminating all of the borders and everything. They wanted to turn those into economic zones, or what
Yeah.
I would call open air prison slave camps.
Yeah.
So this is why they're fighting so hard against all of these national populist groups.
Yep. Yep. You hit the nail right on the head. It's absolutely true. And so that's the end of the rundown on the news that's going on in the world. These stories show why we must stay vigilant and why we must defend both 2A rights, securing our border, and pushing back against global overreach. So let's move on to our main topic, because it ties right into globalism. And that is the Red Baptism, Lenin, the Cheka, and the cult of violence. So as we laid the groundwork with Marx and Engels last episode, this is the continuation. So Marx and Engels were mid to late 1800s. And then somewhat communism didn't really take shape until the early 1900s. Specifically, the big explosion of communism and communistic power was in 1917. As conservatives, we know the importance of standing up and standing firm against tyranny, whether it's from a foreign enemy or our own government. We value the personal responsibility. And so, as we get into this topic, this is important for us to keep in mind to continue on, because it is not just a war against freedom; it's a war against the very root of Christianity, and we will see that as we get into this. So, Lenin didn't lead a political revolution; he launched a spiritual warfare against everything we hold dear as Christians. So, in 1918. He sent a telegram. So the revolution started in 1917. It was in the fall, in October. And that poured over. Lenin took power. And in 1918, he sent a telegram to the Bolshevik officials in Penza, ordering them to publicly hang 100 kulaks. And these are peasants who owned property. So the people for hundreds of miles would see them tremble. And that is, we have actually this telegram that we can read here, specifically, and then I'll get your feedback in this. So it says, comrades, the revolt by the 5 kulaks must be suppressed without mercy. In the interest of the entire revolution demands this, because we have now before us the final decisive battle with the kulaks. Kulaks, sorry, not culottes. Those are pants. We need to set the example. We need to hang without fail, and do it so that the public sees. At least 100 notorious kulaks, the rich and the bloodsuckers, publish their names, take away their all of their grain, execute the hostages. And in accordance with yesterday's telegram, this needs to be accomplished in such a way so that people for hundreds of miles will see, tremble, and know and scream out, "Let's choke and strangle these blood-sucking kulaks." Telegram us acknowledging the receipt of the execution. This, Lenin. P.S. Use your toughest people for this. And approximately a week later, I'm extremely indignant that there has been absolutely nothing definite from you, and the serious measures at last have been carried out by you for the ruthless suppression of the kulaks and the 5 vilost and confiscation of their grain. Your inactivity is criminal. All efforts should be concentrated on a single volost, which should be swept clean, all grain surpluses, telegram fulfillments. And that was Lenin's telegram ordering the execution of these people. Anything that you want to add to that, S2? Are you there?
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why he was getting a little impatient towards the end of that telegram, because when the Bolshevik Revolution formally began in September of 1918, previous to that, there were assassination attempts that were attempted on Lenin, and there were some murders of some key Bolshevik figures like Moisei Uritsky. That was probably the main reason why he kind of sounded like Joe Biden in one of his presidential addresses and said, "We are getting impatient." Or we are
Yep.
growing impatient. Yeah,
Yep.
you have to look at the parallels there. It's almost exactly the same.
Yep. Exactly. And this is another article that is from historyblog.gov. It's a UK article, but this is talking about the before the revolution in 1917 that put the Bolsheviks in power of Russia. Their long exiled leader, Lenin, had insisted publicly that the proletariat dictatorship, so proletariats is a reference to the working class, just for all of you guys to understand. You hear these words and don't know exactly what that means. That is kind of the terminology that, if we were talking about, power of the people kind of stuff. Dictatorship there would be no need for a police force, let alone a secret service. In fact, he already had concluded the coercive organization would be needed to ensure the success of the revolution and neutralize political opposition. However, and we get to our next kind of section, the Cheka, established in December 20th in 1917, was in many ways a reincarnation of the Tsar's security. The Okhrana, making use of the methods. In some cases, it's personal as well. The Cheka's first head was the Pole Felix Dzerzhinsky. Dzerzhinsky. These Z's, Polish names and Russian names have too many Z's in them. And spent years at the Tsarist prisons or exile, and learned his trade craft. So we will look at this other character, and there seems to always be like 2 or 3 characters. There's a figurehead, and then there is another person that kind of does the dirty work, or finances, as we saw with Marx and Engels. Engels was the financier of all of Marx's insane works. So let's look at
that's because Marx was a loser.
Yeah. So Dzerzhinsky was born in 1877 near Minsk in the Russian Empire. He died in 1926. So he died shortly after the revolution started. Was a Bolshevik leader and the head of the first Soviet secret police. That is the Cheka. He is son of a Polish nobleman. Dzerzhinsky joined the Kovno organization, Lithuanian Social Democratic Party. Do you guys remember hearing something? It's maybe a member of the Senate talking about democratic socialism.
Well, there is the Democratic Socialists of America.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting that even in the throes of communism, they use terms like democratic socialists and social democratic party. It's just kind of mincing words, but it's all the same thing. And I thought that was really interesting.
Bernie Sanders and AOC are members of that.
Yep. And so Dzerzhinsky was a cold-blooded revolutionary, and the Cheka were tasked with crushing the resistance to the Bolsheviks. That is the formation of the Cheka. So you have to kind of think of these as like, this is early what became KGB and all of those other organizations that we hear, but we don't hear a lot about that stuff at the very beginning. But the Bolshevik revolution was a move, and while Lenin said that he didn't need a secret police service, 2 months after the revolution started, he actually formed one on using Dzerzhinsky to lead the thing. So yeah, this is a very, very big deal, and this is where Dzerzhinsky himself said that the Cheka represented organized terror and admitted their sword would fall on the innocent. He openly admitted that. S2, you want to share what you know about Dzerzhinsky and really the Cheka, this entire movement, really?
Well, the whole thing was designed to target counter-revolutionaries, the Tsarists, liberals. Yes, they had liberals back then. Non-Bolshevik socialist clergy and the kulaks, as you mentioned. And the Cheka had basically taken out anywhere between 50 to over 140,000 people in their campaign when they were started. And the campaign was aimed to crush dissent, intimidate the population, prevent counter-revolutionary uprisings, particularly in response to the White Terror and foreign intervention. And some historians even view it as a panicked reaction to opposition, while others will argue it was inherent to the Bolshevik ideology. So, I mean, this was kind of proactive because the Bolsheviks faced a lot of resistance from the groups like the left socialist revolutionaries. And they actually had some allies in some of those areas at the end, the Mensheviks, the anarchists, and the white forces. But eventually they kind of fell away. So I don't know much about Dzerzhinsky other than he was the head of the Cheka.
Yeah. Yep. And he died. I mean, the revolution started in 1917. He was dead by 1926. So he was older at the time anyways, in his 50s. And at that time, that was in a rough country like Russia. A lot of people didn't live into their 60s very often. So very much a counter or an issue for him. And so he is a small player in this, but he did set into motion what we know today as secret police, the KGB of the Cold War, and I don't remember what the acronym is for the police force that
FSB.
Putin had.
FSB.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So and this wasn't law enforcement. This wasn't anything. This was the SS that Hitler had. This was, and even deeper than that, it was a priesthood of death, enforcing Lenin's ideology with bullets and fear. And scripture warns us in Isaiah, and we're going to tie this into scripture because we're talking about how antithetical communism is to our Western civilization, our belief in God and Jesus Christ. So it's a big deal that we actually draw these parallels. Woe unto those who call evil good and good evil. The Cheka turned justice upside down. And as conservatives and Christians, we see the danger today in a system that puts ideology over truth. Whether it's cancel culture or government overreach, we must be ready to stand firm because history repeats itself when good men do nothing. And that's the only way that evil can prevail, is for good men to do nothing.
Moving in, I'd like to give you a really nice segue into moving into the Christianity piece of this.
Yeah.
During the Bolshevik Revolution, they had a major inflection point. The They killed the Romanov family, which was the royal monarchy in Russia at the time, and the Romanovs were the last dynasty in Russia to lead as a divine monarchy, which meant that God and Christian religion was the centerpiece to their governance. On July 16th to 17th, 2 days it took them to do this. Um, they killed Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 5 children and the 4 retainers in the basement of the Ipatov house where they were executed. The bodies were burned, doused with acid, and dumped in a mine, although they were later reburied because the incompetent idiots that killed them didn't know what they were doing. But the Orthodox Church canonized Nicholas II and his family as martyrs. And allegedly, their remains were identified in the 1990s and in 2007 and were reburied in St. Petersburg Square in 1998.
That's
So,
an incredible story. That's actually really incredible. That's amazing. So what this was called was the Red Terror. And it was the Bolshevik-led campaign to intimidate, arrests, violence, and executions. And this is an interesting parallel to draw with what we see. You see with Antifa in 2020 and the BLM riots and all this stuff. Is this stuff always wants to appear as it's just random violence. And that's kind of like what Dzerzhinsky said, where, we are the we are the organized terror. It's organized chaos. And that's what the parallel is. And then you see that, as S2 just spoke, the Bolsheviks tried to destroy the Russian Orthodox Church, which had grown quite rapidly and gotten quite large in Russia, leading up to the Russian Revolution in 1917. Religion in the Orthodox Church in particular, were serious obstacles to the creation of the new Soviet man. That's why the Bolsheviks declared, and you guys heard this on the last episode, war on the opiate of the masses. Remember, Marx called religion the drug of the masses because he believed it was just a way for the elites to control the simple man, the lower man. And so this is a very key thing of them adapting to that. And when they started carrying out their ruthless attacks on the church, it was in the name and parroting the language of Karl Marx. And so there was a massive assault on the church and what it's excuse me, what it stood for. And in the period of time assaulting the church, there were at least 28 Orthodox bishops executed. Over 1,200 priests were killed. Entire seminaries were shut down, and monasteries were turned into labor camps. So there was a all-out assault to reduce religion and get it out of Russia, because there was no way, and there still is no way, for communism and Christianity to coexist together without there being some sort of assault from one side or the other. So Lenin saw Christianity as a rival because it teaches the truth that truth comes from God and not the state. As Exodus 20 verse 3 declares, you shall have no other gods before me. And that's straight up out of the 10 Commandments. So for us as conservative Christians, this is a sobering lesson that our faith makes us a target of any regime that demands total control. We need to prepare, and not just with physical defenses, but with spiritual resilience to stand for Christ, no matter what the cost. And this is really where we start to see the monasteries, as I just said in this last one, turned into what they called special purpose camps. we'll get to the gulags when we get to Stalin. These Solovki was a special labor camp that had been turned out of a monastery, and this was on the this was on the White Sea, and in 1923. So by 1922, most of the purging of religion had been completed. And so they moved to any dissenting voices being sent to special purpose camps or re-education camps. And this was one of the early precursors to what became known as the gulags in the 1930s, 40s, and beyond. S2, I will turn the floor over to you.
Well, as conservatives, we see this as a warning. The war on faith and freedom, it never stops. And John 10:10 tells us the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but Christ offers abundant life. And in that way, we must be vigilant, teaching our children the truth of Scripture and preparing our communities to resist any system that seeks to replace God with the state, i.e., evil men.
Yep. And actually, M has a great comment here. Washington, D.C. had J6ers in literal gulags, old prisons that they were held without any kind of due process. And so it does kind of give you a sobering realization that I think it was Ronald Reagan. Don't quote me on this. And while I have issues with Ronald Reagan, I think he was absolutely true about this, is like that we're only one generation away from tyranny. That's why we have to stay vigilant. I believe that was Ronald Reagan. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but
you're correct.
This is an important fight that we quit getting hypnotized, and we quit just allowing this stuff to run roughshod over us. And so in the aftermath of all of these this move with Lenin and the early stages of what became a insane body count, when we get into Stalin, you're going to see, by 1922, like 100,000 people had been executed. This was 5 years after 1917. 100,000 people, that's a lot of people. We're about to take a quantum leap into millions when we get into our next episode and we start talking about Stalin and the NKVD and all of the things that happened. And full disclosure, Stalin, we used him as an ally in World War II to defeat the Nazis because we needed that army. And General George S. Patton was absolutely right at the end of World War II. Yes, we should take out Russia too, because Russia was a absolute and total godless wasteland at the time. And they were at their weakest point at that time as well, having just fought a war. And we were technically at our strongest because we were the only country with nuclear weapons. So winning a war like that would have been much easier back then than it would be now. But S2, I'm going to let you speak to anything else you had to add on anything that we've covered, and then we'll start closing things off. But go ahead and share with what you have left, or if you have anything to add.
Well, I'm just going to say this. It seems a bit ironic now that we had been in this imaginary conflict with Russia all this time because you had the military-industrial complex that wanted to take out Russia. And now it seems that things have come full circle in that in many ways, we are more allied with Russia than we are with any other country right now. We have the EU out there that's fighting against us at every turn. The Ukrainians don't necessarily want to be Ukrainian anymore. A good majority of them want to be Russians as they were before.
Mm-hmm.
And our military industrial complex wants to keep this fight going on with Russia. And what eludes me to this day is when we have a country that is so much like us at this point in history, why do we want them as enemies?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
the question I have.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is a big deal, because what we saw out of the outflow of this beginning of bloodshed was, it was a blueprint, and we've seen the blueprint reimagined multiple times, as we'll get to. And we, like, the next 4 episodes are really going to be the meat of the history of this and how
Are
it
you
spread
saying
all
are you saying that we've been unburdened by what has been?
yeah. Yeah. So, and this is like China's CCP using AI surveillance. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago that this was, I think, before COVID, and the people of Taiwan, the people in China were all wearing masks all of the time to hide their identities, because they didn't want the surveillance of the state to find them and be able to figure out who they were. They have internment camps in China and for re-educating citizens. North Korea jails families for ideological crimes. Cuba shuts down churches that preach the gospel over the regime. So this is not something that's gone away. I mean, and the Muslim prisoners in China, that is another thing that's going on. And while I don't agree with the ideology of Islam, there are some very, very bad things going on in the world, and this is a big deal, because it's not dead. It is something that just keeps being reimagined, repackaged, reclothed, and sent back out to do evil to the world. And the result is always mass bloodshed or mass tyranny. So how do we prepare for what the government might do against Christians, like the Bolsheviks did? First, I think the first thing to do is to build a strong community of like-minded believers. It's just like what we talk about with prepping. It's just that you make sure that you align ideologically with the people that you're preparing with. That's a big deal. If you're of the age of being married and you're thinking about getting married, I would suggest you have ideological conversations before you do that. There's nothing that can destroy a relationship faster than misplaced ideologies or misalignment in ideology. And we need each other for that support, just like the underground church in Russia. And one of the largest underground churches in the world today is in China. And so these things are going on, and our fellow Christians are being persecuted. There is mass persecution going on in the Congo right now of Christians. In South Africa, there's persecution of people that profess Christianity. Second, know your rights. The Second Amendment exists for this reason. One of the reasons, and I would say it's probably the top reason, that this has not taken hold in our country at a higher level than it is right now, is because of the Second Amendment. That's why I'm so adamant about it, is because it is our one stand up that we can say, no, you're not going to do this. And finally, ground yourself in Scripture. Memorize key verses. Understand. If you know, here's the thing, and S2, I'll hand the floor over to you after I make this statement. If you know Scripture, you can spot this bad ideology like that. It is because it is so counter to the gospel. It is so counter to the Bible that it is very easily seen if you are dedicated and grounded in Scripture. But we'd love to hear from you all and drop your thoughts and questions either on our Substack or in the comments. Anything that we missed. S2, I'm going to let you add to that. Anything that I missed on just preparing for the potential of this spreading into our country.
I don't think you've missed anything, but one of the things I get the question all the time when it turns out things that I recognize as pattern recognition tend to come true. Everybody asks me, well, how did you know that? Well, for starters, like you said with Scripture is a historical account of the world. that has happened over and over and over again. The names and the faces change, but the game remains the same. So again, if you look into scripture and you follow the story, which it isn't a chronological story the way we would expect it to be, it kind of jumps around a little bit. But for me, it helps me develop my discernment so that I can look at things and I can see what's real and what's not. And that's the other piece of this too, is that they have a new tool now that they're deploying. We have AI now, and there have been things put out on AI that people they believe it's real and it's not. In fact, I had a teaching moment yesterday for all of the folks in the Guardians channel. Some people got pissed off at me about it, but this is what I do. I try to teach people in certain ways so that they can learn to recognize these things for themselves. So understand, propaganda is going to be one of the very strong tools and tactics and procedures that they will use against you to make you forget about God.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be ready for that.
Yep. I was talking to Chris post show on Sunday, and we talked about the decline of the Christian faith in this country. And it's really interesting how it coincides with a lot of things. Specifically, it coincides with the higher proliferation of things like pornography. You saw a big drop in the 70s, and that was when the porn industry really kind of started coming into its own. Once again, in the early 2000s, around the time that Barack Obama won the presidency, what happened then? Well, we got these things, and now you can access porn on this 24/7. Plus, you can be distracted 24/7. And believe me, I fight that distraction portion of this every day of my life, because this is a massive distraction. It's a great tool, but it's also a massive distraction. And then we saw another dip in 2020. Well, that was when the big proliferation of OnlyFans came along, and everybody was locked into their homes, and they could get these secret fantasies, personalized fantasies by these women online. And there is a correlation there, that we are
Attack
feeding
on
the
the nuclear family.
Yeah, well, yeah, right, exactly, because that divides. It makes you view, like, from a male perspective, it makes you view women as objects and not people, and that's the whole goal of porn. And that drives a wedge between you and your spouse if you are married, or you and your significant other, and it brings unrealistic expectations or into the picture. I firmly believe that feeding of the carnal nature is what leads us away from God, whatever that may be. And for every person, it may be different. But we see that, and it is destructive. But what we're seeing now is, over the last year and a half, there has been a shift back up. When you actually watch the line, there's a drop, and then it kind of goes, and then it drops again, and then it drops again. I wish I had actually prepped it to put it up, but I hadn't anticipated going down this road. But then at the end, just the last 18 months, there's a shift back up. And I hope that we see that to continue to go up, because I think there's a lot of younger people that are kind of waking up to this. And this is why we want to bring this information, because they don't teach this about communism in schools. It's a footnote. It's something that is covered as, oh yeah, that was bad, but that's not a real thing anymore. No, it's as alive now as it ever was. There are more slaves in the world now than there were in 1860. Why did I pick that date? Because that was when we started the Civil War in America. So there's more people enslaved now around the world than there were in 1860. And what do we do about that?
It just depends on what the vehicle for your slavery is. It could be alcohol. It could be watching videos on your phone. It could be getting addicted to X, which I am very guilty of.
Yes.
But it's all enslavement. Anything that controls you is an enslavement tool.
Yep. And that is an important thing. So this is really kind of the end of where we were going to leave this, because we've got a lot more to get to. And I tried to break this up into digestible chunks so that you guys understand where we're where each one of these patterns emerge and circulate. And next week's going to be really, this is where it gets really ugly and really abominable of the way that it is presented, and the way that you see the body count just skyrocket under Stalin. So, and so the next episode is going to be this Steel Communion, Stalin, the NKVD, and the Machinery of Fear. So that will be the next episode in this series. And we hope you guys will tune in for that. If you want to hear, we want to hear from you guys. So share your thoughts and comments on our Substack at survivaldispatchnews.substack.com. Or you can just go to Substack and search Survival Dispatch News, and it will pop up. So get in our Substack chat and comment in there. If you are a Guardian, so join the Guardian program. That's the other thing that we want to encourage you guys to do, because it allows us to bring you more of this kind of stuff. It takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of time. And it's a way for us to dispatch information. And some of the information we share cannot be shared because of censorship. So it's a way for us to get that information to you guys behind the paywall of our Guardian membership program. And that's just $9.99 a month, or $95 for the entire year, which saves you about 2.5 months worth of the cost. And you get the free subscription to our magazines, our eMags, and this was collectively 37 magazines worth, $370 retail, and over $1 million went into developing these magazines. They're amazing and very well done. You also get our survival guide and several other things that are available for you guys, exclusive content and everything else. I'd like to give a shout out to the first clip that we showed to RMO 2300 more for submitting the best news story, which was the Antifa return. Actually, several people, but I usually look through, and the first one that strikes my fancy is the one that I'll pull up there, and I thought it was really good and fitting for what we're doing. Don't forget to tune in next time for the Steel Communion, and that will excuse me, that will either be on Sunday or Tuesday. I actually got to I'm going to get this schedule correct, but our next communism episode will be on the Stalin portion of the history of communism. Thank you guys, especially the subscribers, for your unwavering support. We couldn't spend countless hours bringing you truthful news without you. You really do support this operation. You really do make it possible for us to do it. And so for all of us at Survival Dispatch, I'm John Wheaton. He's S2. And we're reminding you that Survival Dispatch is your trusted resource for staying prepared, staying firm in faith and freedom. We'll see you guys on the next episode. And until then, keep your eyes on the horizon and your hearts on the cross. God bless America.
Hoorah.
President Trump kicking off another busy week at the White House.
It has been yet another eventful week in Washington.
The activity level is off the charts. The president dialed in. He is executing his agenda at a lightning fast pace. Here's something we rarely see in American politics. President Trump is actually keeping his campaign promises, and he's doing them as quickly as possible.
This administration's moving at political light speed, and they're just getting started.
We're going to have one shot at this, and no other president's going to do what I'm doing. Goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form. Have a good life. We will see you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Official, former President Donald Trump will be running for president again in 2024.
Donald Trump got the stamina and the will to do it again? He's come under such tremendous...
Everything is on the line in this election.
A busy day in the campaign world up in Butler today. Former President Trump holding a rally at 5 o'clock.
They just tried to kill President Trump.
Not even an assassin's bullet could stop him.
It feels like the climax of a superhero movie. The first act, up 2016, the second act 2020, the third act he almost dies, and then what happens?
Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
Rare in American politics, a presidential sequel.
He believes he has a, quote, mandate to bring common sense back to the country.
It's our time to take up the righteous cause of American liberty and begin the most thrilling days in the history of our country. This will be our greatest era. With God's help, over the next 4 years, we are going to lead this nation even higher, and we are going to forge the freest, most advanced, most dynamic, and most dominant civilization ever to exist on the face of this earth.
He has the opportunity to reset everything around the world.
Under President Trump's leadership, the message to America's enemies is loud and clear. Peace through strength is back.
No amount of hysteria, no amount of fear-mongering is going to shake the president's resolve.
This is the wholesale destruction of the liberal state. He is gutting liberal Washington, D.C. in a way that they say could be permanent.
47 means business. The White House is holding all the cards.
I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success.
The bottom line is whether you like Trump or you don't like him, you can't say that he's coming and not try to deliver, and he's doing so in historic fashion.
A tide of change is sweeping the country. Sunlight is pouring over the entire world. And America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before.